with Code Pink. We are joined by Watermelon Pictures, Palestinian Youth Movement, to talk about cultural production, and how it pertains to the Palestinian Solidarity Movement. This webinar will highlight the importance of Palestinian culture production in the fight against imperialist and Zionist propaganda. We will hear about Code Pink's activism, Watermelon Pictures' cultural work, and you will learn how you can incorporate the fight for Palestinian liberation into your own cultural spaces. And then later, we're going to hear from Cherien Dabis, who will give remarks and discuss her film, All That's Left of You. I'm going to quickly introduce our speakers that are here today, and then I'm going to go over some of our community norms, and then I will get us started. But you guys all know Janine. She is our Code Pink Palestine campaigner. She has been a community organizer and dedicated individual focused on the Palestinian movement through advocacy, digital storytelling, and grassroots movements. We have Noelle from Watermelon Pictures. She is a part of the Watermelon Pictures grassroots team and working to bring Palestinian and other underrepresented stories to audiences through community outreach and engagement. And then we have Salma Hassan, who is an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement, as well as a musician and cultural worker based in the Bay Area. Quickly, I'm going to go over our norms, which we have for all online educational spaces. Please be respectful. This isn't a debate, but a discussion. We're not here to mediate arguments in the chat, but instead here to learn from each other. Please be kind, be curious, be ready to take action. And above all, please refrain from posting anything crazy in the Q&A or the comments. We record and live stream these classes and these educational webinars to use for months and years to come. So we want to make sure that everything we're doing pertains to what we're talking about, but I know you guys will all stay super on topic anyway. So I'm first going to pass it to Salma to talk about kind of framing while we're here, talk about the Palestinian Youth Movement, and yeah, I'll pass it over.
Thank you, Grace, Code Pink, Watermelon Pictures, and everybody here. Thank you for being on this webinar. Talking about culture and cultural resistance is one of my favorite topics, so I'm pretty honored to be here to talk about it with y'all. As Grace introduced me, I'm Salma. I'm with the Palestinian Youth Movement. We are a grassroots independent youth organization of Arab and Palestinian youth that organizes here in the diaspora as active agents of our struggle. And what we wanted to start this webinar with is kind of like an understanding of what is cultural resistance, and why it's important, and how do we see the role of cultural production in the movement. And so for me, we understand culture to be the water that we swim in. Culture is everything around us, from the music we hear when we walk into the store, it is the posters that we see when we enter the doctor's office, it is the books and art pieces in our libraries and homes. Culture informs who we are, what we value, and how we act, not only as individuals, but as an entire society. It is everything that we see and interact with every day. In the struggle for the liberation of Palestine, our culture is essential. It embodies our identity, narrative, and resistance to decades of colonization and ethnic cleansing. Storytelling, song, dance, and imagery have become weapons in their own right. They have allowed Palestinians to express, popularize, and unite around aspirations and political realities. To this day, every poem, painting, or dance that speaks of Palestinian life and longing for liberation is an affirmative statement. It's an affirmative statement that says we are a dignified people, a people that have resisted for over 100 years, a proud people with rich history, traditions, and a deep and everlasting love for our people and our land. We will not be erased or obliterated. It is through the preservation of our culture and its practice and celebration that we are able to ensure the survival of our people and struggle. As Ghassan Kanafani discussed, the struggle for Palestine is a struggle for culture. When you embody that culture, utilize it, preserve and develop it, and make sure it remains alive, you protect your national identity. Culture also plays an essential role beyond national identity. It is a front of confronting and isolating Zionism. The Zionists know this. They target our cultural workers. They assassinate our writers, our journalists, our teachers, our musicians, in an attempt to strip our people from the power that culture holds. Ghassan Kanafani was assassinated for this very reason, for carrying a pen that holds the weight of a gun, for advancing our struggle through the language of the masses. This is the very reason Rifat al-Arir was assassinated, for leading the youth of Gaza through his teachings, his poetry, uniting our people with an expo marker alone. And our enemy knows the importance of cultural resistance. They wield culture as a tool to advance their ethnic cleansing and colonialism. This encompasses everything from the continual theft of Palestinian food, clothing, or dance to the ways Zionists embed their colonial ideology in every domain of public life in an attempt to obtain support for it. Zionism normalizes itself through Israeli flags in the backgrounds of TV shows, or Krav Maga offered to children, or TikToks of IOF soldiers doing their makeup. It cements itself into the minds of everyday people and attempts to write a history which washes the blood off of the hands of genociders. By engaging in resistance arts, we are confronting Zionism. By creating films and producing literature, we are not only countering normalization, but we're reclaiming our narrative and asserting ourselves as a force of power with political agency. We are determining the way that Zionism is written into history, saying to the everyday person that it's actually not normal for your kid's superhero to be a Mossad agent named after the Sabra and Shatila massacre, in which thousands of Palestinians were massacred in tents. It is not normal that a flag which represents the mass murder of tens of thousands of people is hanging up in your child's school when you drop them off. At the same time, we are building the identity of our movement. Resistance arts emerges as a culture front where we combat depoliticization, demoralization, and disillusion. When we sing for our martyrs and our homeland, when we teach our youth to sing وأهديكم ضياء عيني ودفء القلب أعطيكم فمأساتي التي أحيا نصيبي من مآسيكم, which means I give to you the light of my eyes and the warmth of my heart I give to you, for the struggles that I endure are my share of your struggles. When we teach our kids these songs, we are asserting and consolidating the politics of our movement into the minds and the hearts of those in it. A politic which demands that Gaza is our compass, that Palestine is our compass. And so long as we are watching the brutality of Zionist colonization unfold, we are moved to action. And so we assert that practicing and preserving our culture is an active form of defiance. It is defiance against colonization, occupation, and erasure. And as Kanafani said, cultural resistance is not less important or valuable than any other forms of resistance. It is our history, traditions, art, song, language, and importantly, our future. Culture is not static. It changes and evolves with history and time. Culture is also not passive. It does not just happen. It is created. And it is our duty as artists, writers, filmmakers, cultural workers, organizers, and everybody, those in the Palestinian struggle, to understand the weight of culture as a tool and to be intentional in wielding it. And for all of us here, participating and supporting the cultural production of our movement is one of the ways to ensure the effectiveness of this cultural production and its longevity. And so with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Janine to talk to us about the state of our media here and the violence that it produces.
Thank you, Salma. That was amazing. I'm gonna go ahead and share. Oh, Grace, I sent you a request to share my screen.
You're good.
Okay, thank you. Second. Okay. Thank you so much, Selma, for that like really grounding view. It was really amazing. Wait, can everyone see my screen and it's like normal?
Yes.
Okay, great. It was a really grounding intro, and I think it's a really important concept to explore first is, what is culture? How does it pertain to Palestine, to the Palestinian people, to the Palestinian movement? And then how is the ruling class essentially using you know, culture in a way that's actively fighting against our movement here in the US. And this is obviously like an international issue, right? So I'm here to talk about the current state of our media, our news outlets here in the US, and kind of what Code Pink does to fight back against this monopolization, and what we should all be doing to fight back against this monopolization. And these are things that PYM and Watermelon Pictures also very much, join in efforts on. So I kind of just wanted to map this out for you guys, kind of visualize it for you all, the current state of the monopolization of our media and news outlets here in America. So I kind of like did a map here of all the companies that we see, that are essentially now running what we consume. And so here you have Oracle, which has just acquired TikTok, and I'm sure you guys have seen this all on the news. And Oracle is essentially like a surveillance tech company that is owned by Larry Ellison. So he just acquired TikTok, and that's obviously one of the most major forms of media that we all consume on a daily basis. And that's also where a lot of people got all their news about Palestine for a long time, and where a lot of people got taught about Palestine. And then you have Skydance Media, which owns Paramount, which was bought out by Larry Ellison, he owns Oracle. And then Paramount bought out CBS. And then CBS acquired the Free Press, which is a notoriously right-wing media outlet, news outlet that regurgitates a lot of Zionist and Israeli propaganda, and is literally run by Bari Weiss, who calls herself a proud Zionist fanatic, just on the daily. And because of that acquisition, she's now the editor-in-chief at CBS News. And that's why we're seeing developments of CBS News closely working with the Trump administration and actively censoring news pieces like the El Salvador 60 Minutes episode that had just came out around like 2 weeks ago, where it was basically talking about how ICE deportees are being sent to one of the most dangerous prisons in the whole entire world. But Bari Weiss cut that episode and never aired it because the Trump administration never commented on it. And she wanted to both sides a torture center, essentially. So that's kind of how you're seeing all of this trickle down and affect what we're getting as news consumers. And then next you have Netflix, and Paramount, which is the Ellisons. They're fighting for Warner Brothers, and that's another issue because because now you're having like this monopoly that's running TikTok, CBS, the Free Press, Paramount, Skydance, wanting to acquire another major like you know, film company and content company. And then you also have Netflix, who's in on this deal or like fighting for the deal. And they're also trying to repress our cultural mediums. So this is dangerous because, number one, information dissemination is now very limited. It's an AI and it's the effects, or it's the attempt of AI and groupthink to kind of take over how we see the media and how we see our news. And instead of actual conversations and analysis being given to us, it's now getting very robotic and very what's it called? Like saturated with the opinions that we're getting, and obviously very biased. And now culture is being eliminated because you have people like the Netflix CEO, Ted Sarandos, who's saying, we're in a period of transition. Folks grew up thinking I want to make movies on a gigantic screen and have strangers watch them, and to have them play in the theater for 2 months and people cry in sold out shows. But this is now an outdated concept. So you have someone who's doing this major fight to get one of these major companies, basically saying that all the things that we value as movie consumers, as news consumers, as media and content and culture consumers is an outdated concept. And that's sort of like the modernizing and um the belittling of these things that we love so much, and then we also look to kind of form our opinions on world events and world happenings. Um, so how does this pertain to the Palestine movement? Obviously, this is like a huge instance of propaganda against the Palestine movement because it's an effect of a concerted effort by the ruling class to seep into our cultural media and to remove any space for personalized and communal content that could allow people to critically think about the world. So when you have people like Barry Weiss showing up, becoming editors-in-chief of one of the major news outlets in America that was previously a very neutral media outlet, it's an obvious change, right? It's an obvious shift in how we are receiving our news and our content. And it's not accidental, it's very calculated. And it's also because the population is becoming increasingly more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause because of social media like TikTok, because of films and friendly news outlets, and that's exactly what the opposition does not want. So whenever you have people like Benjamin Netanyahu coming out and saying that TikTok is now one of the things that he wants to focus on even more, and he's paying influencers $7,000 per video to do Israeli propaganda on TikTok. And then you have people like Hillary Clinton coming out and saying that these young people and these students have been brainwashed by TikTok because they're now all very pro-Palestine. This is all, like I said, a concerted effort by the ruling class because they don't like to see Palestine in the mainstream media. They don't like to see sympathy to the Palestinian cause. They don't like to see our voices and our stories being told because that obviously contradicts all of their points, all of their agendas, and that's not what they want. They don't want the freedom for Palestine or the freedom of our stories. So this is obviously something very concerning to witness, but it's something that we have to keep an eye on, and it's something that we obviously have to, work towards and take action against. So at CODEPINK, we do a lot of work around this. One of our main focuses at the Palestine campaign is on culture and propaganda. We aim to pressure platforms and news companies like Netflix, CBS, Paramount, and the New York Times, among many others, to amplify Palestinian stories and remove or label state propaganda while bringing Palestinian narratives to everyday people by strategically connecting on cultural issues. And you can read more about this at codepink.org/culture and propaganda. But we take a lot of action against these big corporations and their monopolization efforts of our media and news outlets. We've disrupted Barry Weiss at her events. We're constantly sending letters and signing petitions and delivering petitions to the CBS and Paramount offices in LA and Chicago. We've had some in Philadelphia, just all over the country. It's something that people are really mobilized about, and it's something that we all feel connected to because we all consume media on all of these platforms. You know what I mean? Whenever Netflix takes down a whole entire Palestinian stories, a section on their website or on their platform, that's an obvious, that's an obvious slap in the face to the Palestinian movement and to the Palestinian narrative in general. And then whenever CBS and Paramount are disseminating, very biased viewpoints, that's an obvious attack. And then the New York Times as well, you have these people who are like defying journalistic integrity every single day because they're coming out with bogus news stories like, no, Israel is not committing a genocide in Gaza. So these are all these things that we are seeing in our everyday lives that we have to fight back against and take action against. And we do that a lot here at CODEPINK. And you can, like I said, go on codepink.org/culture and propaganda to learn more and see how you can take action. But this is a really great segue into the next section of the webinar, where Noel is going to talk about Watermelon Pictures and how they kind of fight back against all of this in their own way and keep that cultural preservation alive. So on to you, Noel.
Thank you, Janine, and thank you, Selma. Okay, so first, I'll introduce what Watermelon Pictures is, and then we'll get into the meat of it. So Watermelon Pictures is a Palestinian owned film distributor that focuses on bold, uncensored stories, films that push back against dominant narratives and make space for voices that are often shut out. It was founded by two brothers who understood that telling these stories isn't enough. They also need to be supported and they need to be brought to audiences. And the story of Watermelon really starts earlier in the 1960s with their father and uncle after the Naksa. They started MPI Media Group, which is a film distribution company that was later passed down to the brothers. And growing up around the industry gave them both the knowledge and the responsibility to use what they had to uplift Palestinian stories. And that responsibility is at the heart of why distribution, why maintaining our stories matters so much. We've seen so many powerful films struggle simply because they don't have the backing to reach people. And Watermelon acts as a home for these stories, making sure that they don't get lost and that they are able to reach screens, to reach audiences and communities who want to engage with them. We also recently launched Watermelon Plus, which is a curated streaming platform designed to give these films a life beyond the theater, making them both accessible to audiences and preserved for the future. So Watermelon Pictures isn't just a distributor, it's connected to a larger effort in the movement. And this brings us to the role of cultural institutions. So cultural institutions hold a strong importance in the Palestinian struggle because they sustain and protect systems that the occupation, that displacement, and censorship often work to erase, which is our history and our collective memory. So in the context where our people are facing genocide and ethnic cleansing and cultural institutions, cultural institutions become crucial sites where Palestinian memory and identity are asserted, and not only asserted, but they are preserved. And that's important to understand. These institutions, whether film or archival theaters, museums, libraries, community centers, or cultural networks, have done more and are doing more than producing art. They shape the political consciousness of people. They document lived realities, counter narratives, and demand that Palestinians be seen. Cultural institutions also resist fragmentation. Zionism and forced exile have scattered our people across continents, and cultural spaces allow Palestinians in the homeland and in the diaspora to remain connected through our shared stories and through our history. So Watermelon Pictures is a great example of this in action, operating not only as a film company, but as a cultural institution by producing, preserving, and distributing Palestinian and revolutionary media. Watermelon Pictures has been able to create that infrastructure needed for Palestinian stories to reach audiences globally. And that is significant because of how it has been able to establish a system that supports and ensures the making of Palestinian cinema and allowing these stories to be seen at all. In addition to this, Watermelon Pictures acts as a space that preserves and archives films as part of a broader cultural memory. And this kind of preservation is a form of resistance. It asserts that despite occupation and displacement, Palestinian history and Palestinian voices endure. And this in itself sustains Palestinian identity and it ensures longevity. That is the foundation, but it's not the endpoint. So when these films are shown in theaters, they take on a whole different kind of role. So theaters, Palestinian cinema has always existed under conditions of constraint that could look like limited funding, restricted movement, censorship, or political pressure. And within this context, the act of making a film with the intention to educate, to politicize, and to preserve history is an act of cultural resistance. How a film is made is not only a part of this process, though. What happens after, how it's received, how it's dispersed, how it's supported matters just as much. This is where theater attendance becomes critical. So at Watermelon, we work to sustain the full life cycle of Palestinian cinema so that these stories can continue to be created and shared with the world. And going to the movies to watch Palestinian films becomes a real, tangible form of cultural resistance. And this is not limited to just Watermelon Picture films, but Palestinian cinema as a whole. And we're able to imagine this into three different sections. So first, theater attendance. Theater attendance is a form of direct material support. Strong turnout allows these films to reach more screens, secure longer runs in theaters, and to connect with a wide audience. For Palestinian filmmakers whose work is often excluded from theatrical spaces, Attendance sends a clear message that these stories are wanted, that these stories are valued, and that they deserve to be seen on a big screen with an audience and with community who feels represented in these stories. This support helps ensure filmmakers can continue working, continue telling their stories, and continue documenting realities that are so often distorted or intentionally erased in mainstream media. Even small town theaters that used to refuse talkbacks are now opening their doors because of the audience interest. They've realized that there's demand to engage with Palestinian stories. And now, because of that, we are able to shape these conversations that are happening. Second, theater going is a way to collectively build with your community, which is so important in this aspect. Watching Palestinian films with family, with your friends, with your community makes it more than just seeing the movie. It becomes something that you experience together and that you can connect over through shared history. The theater in this point becomes a place where people are able to gather and to sit with our history and our resistance together. And in this way, cinema resists the deliberate fragmentation of our people caused by Zionism and settler colonialism and forced exile. Finally, theater attendance works against dominant media narratives. So earlier in this webinar, we heard Janine go through the ways in which mainstream media often operates in service of Zionist frameworks, in turn suppressing Palestinian voices. And showing up physically to engage with Palestinian stories holds meaning. It challenges a system that seeks to silence these narratives, and it asserts our presence both as audiences, but also the filmmakers. Being physically in the theater is not a passive act. It is an intentional rejection of erasure of Zionist structures that we see so often in media today. So with that, going to watch these movies is not just about watching a film. It is about participating and supporting Palestinian cultural production, strengthening community ties and its collective memory, and insisting that these stories belong in the public space and belong on a big screen. And we have a few titles releasing very soon. Palestine 36, which is set during the Palestinian revolt against British colonial rule. This film follows a character named Yusuf, who is in between his village and his work in Jerusalem amidst the revolt. And then we also have All That's Left of You, which hits theaters in Los Angeles, the Bay Area, and New York City this coming weekend on January 9th, and expands across North America on January 16th. The film spans 7 decades and is a multi-generational trauma that traces the Palestinian experience from the start of the Nakba to present day, when a Palestinian teenager is caught in a protest. A single act of violence changes his family's life, and we see his mother's reflections unfold across generations. We're also excited to share remarks from All That's Left of You filmmaker Cherien Dabis, who will speak about the film and its important role of cultural production in the Palestinian movement today. So we can get that started. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 second.
That sentence is over 2,000 years old. Plato said it. And today, it may be the most dangerous truth there is. My name is Cherien Dabis. I'm a Palestinian American filmmaker, and I'm here to tell you this. For us, storytelling is not a luxury. It's a matter of survival. Stories aren't just entertainment. They're how humans understand reality. Everything is story. Our memories, our identities, history itself. Story. We like to think we're logical creatures, but we're emotional ones, and stories speak the language of emotion. They teach empathy. They decide who's human and who's disposable. Storytellers decide who gets to be the hero and who gets cast as the villain. And history? Well, we know that it's often just a story written by the conquerors. So when you've been written out of history, you must tell your own story. When Palestinians are spoken about, it's usually in terms of numbers. But numbers don't cry, numbers don't laugh, numbers don't dream. People do. So what happens when people are denied the right to narrate? When the only stories told about them are myths or lies or stereotypes? I learned this at the young age of 14. It was the first Gulf War, and my family became the enemy overnight. My dad, a pediatrician who saved the lives of many children in this small town I grew up in, lost half his patients. We received death threats on a daily basis. I had to stop and ask myself, how did this happen? How did my dad suddenly become a threat in people's minds? And that's when I started to see it. Story after story, telling people who we were supposed to be, film, media, television, stereotypes. That's when I understood the power of film and television and the urgency of controlling the narrative. My third feature film, All That's Left of You, is about to open in cinemas across North America. It tells the story of one Palestinian family across 3 generations from 1948 to nearly the present day. It's our origin story. We premiered at Sundance last January, 1,200 people in a packed theater, crying, laughing, hugging each other by the end, because suddenly Palestinians weren't headlines. We were human beings. And yet, major distributors told us, we love the film, it's powerful, but we're afraid of the subject matter. Fear. That's what we're up against. That's how censorship works. But we push harder because silence is not an option. Palestinian filmmaking is not niche. It is not symbolic. It is not only for Palestinians. Cinema is a language that crosses borders, changes stubborn minds, opens hearts, and creates lasting impact. Film reaches people where arguments can't. It moves people emotionally, and emotion is what moves people to action. And that's why Palestinian cinema matters now more than ever. It is resistance. It is the preservation of memory. It is how we refuse erasure. All That's Left of You is the first ever Nekba epic to reach theaters. That matters. Because what happens next sets a precedent for the future of Palestinian cinema. And here's the truth. The only way this work survives is in theaters. Buying a ticket tells theaters, exhibitors, distributors, gatekeepers, the industry at large, that these stories matter. These stories have an audience. They belong on big screens. They are not marginal. So this is my ask. If you can watch All That's Left of You with family and friends, buy tickets as a group, bring your community, fill the theater. If you can't go as a group, buy yourself a ticket. And if you can't watch it at all, buy a ticket for someone who can, pay it forward, because every ticket extends the life of this film. Every ticket protects Palestinian storytelling. Every ticket helps secure a future where our stories are not erased, censored, or suppressed. This moment is bigger than one movie. It's about whether Palestinian cinema gets to exist at all, not online, but in the world. Show up for this movie, show up for our stories, and help us keep telling them, because those who tell the stories shape the world. Those who tell the stories rule.
Thank you. That was that was a really great message. I'm gonna go ahead real quick and present the slides again after hearing, those beautiful words from a Palestinian filmmaker, and kind of seeing the ways that we can play a part in cultural preservation. These are some ways that you can take action. And like at CODEPINK, we have people that we work with that are getting censored and fired from working on it, from working in the inside. And we need to like be allies to them and be support systems to them, and do our work on the outside to uplift those that are in the inside. You know what I mean? So these are all some super easy things that you guys can do. Like Noelle said, go watch All That's Left of You in theaters. Like Shanine said, that's one of the main ways to kind of show up and show presence for the Palestinian narrative. Download Watermelon Plus instead of Netflix, because Netflix doesn't like Palestinian stories, apparently. And kind of like educate yourself, educate others on Palestinian stories, and then actually take action against these companies, against these billionaires who are trying to control the narrative and trying to control policy for trying to control policy that is anti-Palestinian. So at Code Pink, we have a letter that's ongoing to CBS and Paramount executives telling them to drop Barry Weiss because she's the token, Zionist voice there who's kind of looking at all the stories and giving the green light on what can be published and what can't be published. So you can go ahead and read and sign that letter in the chat. I think Grace will send the link. And then also we have flyers that you can take to screenings of All That's Left of You, or any just movie that you see that pertains to Palestine, or maybe even not, just, show up at the theater and try to educate people on cultural production and the importance of it, and the importance that it has on human lives, you know what I mean, to take to screenings. And that's on our culture and propaganda website. So that's really what I have for action. I don't know if Noelle or Selma, you guys have anything to add about the action part or any items.
I think you covered it great, Janine. Thanks.
Yeah, I think so too, which is good because it also touches on the question, right, that we got about this. Different ways that people can participate in culture preservation. And I'd say support your cultural institutions that are doing work, right? Like very important work for Palestine and for revolutionary like cultural production in general, right? Because it all feeds into one another. And we know that cultural production requires the people consuming it and participating in it for it to continue. Whether that's, by supporting, support if you know that there's a Watermelon Pictures movie that's gonna be in your theater or in your city, go watch it. Bring a friend, bring your family, take folks, and we all try to hustle, especially when it comes to consuming movies or consuming music and so on, which I get, given the way that it's kind of created for consumption in a country like the US, but at the same time it's really important for us to support our folks who are doing this cultural production work. That's really we're the underdogs, right? Because we're not in the mainstream. And we're not on the mainstream for a reason. It's part of silencing us. So support the cultural institutions that are doing this kind of this work, this really important work, and support revolutionary cultural production in general. Yeah, that's what I would just kind of piggyback and add to what Janine was saying.
I don't know if I have much more to add. I don't know, Noelle, if you have anything. Okay. I think, yeah, I also think these very easy, tangible actions that we have, are ways to participate in the sustainability of cultural preservation, you know what I mean? So, always fighting back against the ruling class and them trying to take over the stories is a way that anyone can, participate in cultural preservation in their everyday life, in my opinion. Okay. I think we have another question as well. It's essentially about what roadblocks are there to understanding what roadblocks are there to just distributing films and distributing, these cultural modems that we all try to, seek out to keep the Palestinian story alive. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if you guys have any things to add about that. Basically the roadblocks that Zionists and, like I said, these billionaires try to put in our way to suppress us.
I think I can add similar to what you're saying, Janine, and what you spoke about, the roadblock that definitely exists is fighting against the mainstream media and intentional Zionist propaganda created to not allow these stories to exist, which is why it's so important to support in any way that you're able to engage with it, to keep up with these cultural institutions, with what's playing in theaters, and really share with the people around you in your community.
There was a question in the chat, and that's a really great answer, Noah. Thank you. And I think I like went on and on about the roadblocks that there are like on an institutional level. So everyone pretty much gets that. What is the best way to reach independent theater owners to screen these films? I feel like actually I don't know much about that, to be honest. But I know that like at CODEPINK we do facilitate a lot of screenings for films like this. So maybe like reaching out to a chapter in your area, you can always do that. Reaching out to Watermelon Pictures as well, something like that, in my opinion.
I think also just to add to that, showing that you're interested to these independent theater owners really does make a difference. Like going there, emailing them, letting them know that there is interest for these films and these theaters. It's a great way to let them know that.
I would also say that Watermelon Pictures actually like brings these films right to these independent theaters and like build these relationships. And so from an audience standpoint, which is also kind of to the question of there's a question in the chat about what do you think it takes for film distributors to overcome the fear of sharing Palestinian stories that was spoken about. And really what it is our participation, showing that the people are interested in these films. That's the gist of it, right? That's how we can very tangibly, very simply support and make sure that these films get shown and these films continue to get shown. So it's not like a one-time screening, but rather this is showing in theaters for this whole week or 2 weeks. And it's because we're interested in going and watching this film. So I'd say that that's the most tangible, like best way to support.
Yeah, honestly, I think like and we can this may like be a part of the question that was also asked was what do you think it takes for film distributors to overcome the fear of sharing Palestinian stories? Like Salma said, it's showing up to them and being interested in them. And I mean, I can just like share like a personal anecdote. I can share a personal anecdote of like when I went to go see the movie like The Voice of Hind Rajab in theaters, you know what I mean? And like seeing how emotionally affected everyone was from just one film. Um and I know that like, everyone in that room, obviously, like not everyone in that room may have had the same like opinions or background as me, you know what I mean? So it's like it's really just maybe like making it clear to these film distributors that like these are real stories and they have actual effects on people, and also not just people, but like policy. It has real effects on, you know, how the world kind of moves and reacts to reacts to world events. Like if all this Palestinian media was available before October 7th, would there have been such an intense pushback or like an intense like reactionary view of the Palestinian movement when it happened? Like these are sorts of things to think about, is that, just kind of bolstering and making our narrative more mainstream so that people can like understand us, even though it's not hard to understand us, but some people find it difficult, I guess. Um, yeah, one thing to also mention is that we had huge successes like flyering and taking actions after these stories were like projected in these theaters. So movies like Nuremberg, movies like The World's Greatest Enemy that Abby Martin directed. It's kind of just like engaging in conversation with these people. Also, like after you've watched these films together, having that open forum, having those actions right after to give them is really helpful too. And I think that, open discussion is great around these sorts of cultural productions.
Also, one more thing to add to that. I know we're kind of a broken record about going to the theaters, but to touch on what makes the biggest impact, getting these films to more theaters is attending the screenings where they're already happening, bringing your organization, bringing your family. You know, we collaborate at Watermelon with organizations who bring groups to theaters. So that's always something that you can email us about if you have questions or if you're interested in doing that. But yeah.
I think a good example of this is the Encampment film when it came out, and there was a lot of mobilization that happened. Like, PYM also participated in mobilizing folks to go and watch the films, and we were able, by like outreaching and bringing out the community, to like sell out multiple days, and which helped like the movie remain in the theater to be shown for a longer period of time. And so we can always, just as one org or one, collective, go and screen these films for one time in a theater and just like do a whole event around it. Or, as Noel was saying, we can bring people out to showtimes that already exist, to basically support the effort of Watermelon Pictures themselves in putting and releasing films in theaters for a sustained kind of like period of time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And people are saying that in the chat too. So, great points. We have another question coming in. What is your opinion of productions featuring Palestinians in film/television on platforms like Netflix? Do you think that these productions are done with positive intent, or do you think that it's only to save face? I think it depends on who makes the film and who makes the production. And I think just maybe in general, like rule of thumb is just to look to Palestinians, for their own story. Yeah. I think we have another question too. What have you all as creatives seen that organizing spaces can learn from the creative process and vice versa? So how can the two relate to each other or like bounce off of each other, basically?
Could you repeat the question, Janine, please?
Yeah. What have you all as creatives seen that organizing spaces can learn from the creative process?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think about it. There's so many different ways we can take it too, right? And I think as a grassroots organization that's engaging in culture and resistance art and culture in general, one of the big learnings I think is the way that it speaks to the community. Like, people are hungry to participate in their culture. And I say that, especially like living in the imperial core in the US, where we don't consume our culture on a daily basis. Because like back home, the culture is everywhere. It's how you're living your life. And so like it's just part of how you are operating in the world, right? It's the music you listen to, the food you eat, and so on. But here we're removed from it. That fragmentation is real, and it's intentional, right? To fragment us from our culture and from our language and so on. So what I've noticed is the way that it really drives people. And here, like, maybe an example I can use is the Palestinian Youth Ensemble's performance at the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit this past summer. It was the first time we debuted the ensemble, and really like the reception that we witnessed, like when we saw the audience engage with the music we were playing, was mind blowing. Like, I knew in my heart and in my gut that culture and music is popular, right? but I didn't know to what extent it will actually move people. And I think, engaging in it in like intentionally, like in cultural production, in the creative process, bringing people along with you in those processes as well, and not doing it in isolation, but doing it in collectively, really like it moves people, and it really like it takes these like political concepts and politics that we talk about, and analysis that we try to share, and really distill them to feelings, how like it touches you on a human level, and it makes it tangible in that way, and not just like an idea that like you're consuming on a like up here cloud kind of way. Me with my words that I'm using right now.
Sorry, I was trying to see if anyone else had anything else to say. Um, that's a really good point. I think people do seek for these like outlets, and they don't know where to kind of to reach them, because like the Palestinian narrative is not one that's mainstream. Like these are not even narrative, just like also just like our stories, our culture, like these are things that are kind of hard to find if you're not in these spaces already. So it's also, I think, like that's why us as activists, no matter what organization we are in, like PYM isn't necessarily like a creative, organization. Or like CODEPINK, we love doing creatives in our activism. We love, putting images out there and visualizing our activism. And that's why these things are so important, is because creativity and culture is political, and like these are all things that we drive forward, is like the politics of peace in the world, which is obviously very like colorful and like joyous. So yeah.
I think also just on this question of culture in organizing spaces, utilizing culture is a great and really important way to reach broad audiences, and it's palatable too. And base building with your community is vital in ensuring the longevity of that. So I think like speaking with the people around you, attending events from organizations, attending screenings, bringing community, going to community and having these conversations is really, really important.
And maybe just lastly, what I would just tag on to that is that if you're a creative yourself, if you are an artist yourself, think about how you can contribute, right? As an artist to the movement, to revolutionary culture production in general, whether you're Arab Palestinian or not, right? It's also part of this is also making sure like giving artists and cultural workers the space, being like, you also belong in this movement, and this is how. The skill that you hold is a skill that's necessary for advancing politics and movement. And so, how can you contribute as a cultural worker and as an artist in the production of revolutionary art?
No, I think there are some questions. There's a question for Watermelon Pictures. Do you guys bring people from other cities/states to places where a film is screening?
Bring people or bring showings to that theater.
But I think I misunderstood the question.
I'm gonna read it as showings, but really to bring showings to smaller theaters in like smaller cities, the most important thing is getting people to the big dog cities, so Los Angeles, Bay Area, New York City, like making sure and ensuring that people are attending these screenings shows other theaters that people are interested in these movies and want to go see them, and that it's ensuring for those theaters that there will be seats, people in seats. So I hope that answered your question. But if you have a follow-up, feel free to ask in the chat.
Also, I just want to clarify. I meant to say PYM isn't necessarily wasn't founded as a creative org, but now you guys incorporate creatives and culture and all that you do because it's so important. I don't want to misspeak.
You're good. I understood it as such anyways.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I think this will be the last question that we take today. It says, are there any screenings in cultural institutions like the Palestine Museum? I think that's a great initiative to take, like, on if you have these institutions in your locale, and to also bring in other, you know, organizations into it. If you have any local chapters around you of CODEPINK, PYM, you know, these are things that, like Noel said, like that's a very great opportunity to base build and to provide places to take action, you know, just in community. So, that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, and we do have independent screenings with spaces and organizations, and we're actually collaborating with the museum for a bunch of screenings coming up. You know, it's really important that we work with organizations because they ensure the longevity of these stories by holding these screenings and by having these critical conversations with the audience afterwards. And usually while these films are in theaters, we have them exclusive to theaters, and sometimes orgs bring the groups to theaters and have the discussions there. But theaters for as long as they can. And then we have trusted orgs that we work with who are able to have conversations with the community and really impact audiences with that tangible change necessary. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much. I'll have Grace do an outro. But yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you guys all so much for joining. What an amazing hour full of reflection and discussion. And we're so grateful to Cherien for giving us a glance into her film and also just the importance, as also Noelle and Salma and Janine said, of going to see films, going to create films, creating art within this movement. Thank you to Watermelon Pictures and Palestinian Youth Movement for that necessary framing and for the context of this conversation. And thank you all so much for tuning in. You asked such amazing questions, and throughout the entire chat, you were taking action with us for Palestine, for culture, for creativity, and also for each other. So we would not be having these kind of webinars if it weren't for all of you. So thank you so much. If you missed a link, a resource, if you missed part of the recording, we will have a follow-up email that will have absolutely everything in it. So don't feel worried if you missed something, and we will be seeing all of you very soon. And I'll type the last few links in here one more time. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for having us, CODEPINK.
Thank